Smile, be, chat, join for networking.
Anything is possible. I want you to have a little think about those three words for a minute. Anything is possible. So when somebody says to you that you're going to go for a swim for 2.5 miles in open, rough water, and then get out of the water and cycle for 112 miles, and then jump off your bike and run a marathon in under 17 hours, you then go back to those words, anything is possible. And they happen to be the mantra or the strap line for a brand called Ironman who run triathlons. An Ironman triathlon is exactly that, a 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike ride, followed by a marathon in under 17 hours. So why on earth would I enter an Ironman triathlon in the winter of 2014 with the aim of completing that? Well, actually, it needs to step back a little bit to take you back to 2011 when I kind of stood on the scales and actually I'd reached a point where I wasn't happy. I'd reached a point where they started to tip over 15 stone. I'd always been a fit young rugby player and then taken a 5-year gap to sort of spend a lot of time with my children and come away from the rugby pitch. And that just happened. It crept on over time. So you kind of lost something that you had. And so at that point when I stood on the scales, I knew something had to happen and something had to change. And I was actually, the pinch point moment was when I was on the other side of a camera lens as a sports photographer shooting a triathlon. And I'd always visioned triathlon to be, you know, fit young people, very, very skinny, very, very active, and they'd be able to go out there and do it straight away. When actually what I saw was people really enjoying themselves, swimming, biking and running, which we all do. You know, some people enjoy all three, some people enjoy one or two of them. So I'd seen that and I knew that something had to change on that day. So I came back and I got drunk with my brother, Danny, and my cousin James, and I said, come on guys, let's do a triathlon. And in no time we'd entered our first one, a little baby one, a sprint triathlon, which is a 400 metre swim followed by a 20-kilometre bike ride and a 5k run. Really simple. And yeah, that first one we entered is still the hardest triathlon that I've ever done, up in Buxton. But from that point onwards in 2011, I got the bug to do something that I really enjoyed, which is swim, bike, run. The variety in training that you get is fantastic. And me and my cousin James, who I just mentioned, we decided to take it a level further each year, up to the point where we had a few too many Pernod's again. And in the winter of 2014, my 40th year, we said next year is going to be the year and we're going to enter an Ironman triathlon. So that starts you thinking then, and it brings me into the 3 areas that I'd like to talk about, and actually a 4th one that I'll reveal to you later that you really do need. The 3 areas where I started to approach how am I going to do this Ironman triathlon is actually knowledge, accountability and control. So the first big one for me was knowledge. There's a big difference between doing, you know, a 5k run or a 10k run and the distance that's involved in an Ironman. And to be able to go from that transition was actually a really big factor. So if you're faced with an event or you're faced with something that you're going to do, the first thing that people think about is how am I going to achieve this? And they hit the gym and they see the cross trainer and they go to the cross trainer and they hit it really hard and absolutely go for it and then come out of the gym and they're aching the day after because they can't do any more exercise and then they have to wait a week before they go in again. And when you start to think about an endurance event, you have to really start to change that mentality. Now, I started to do a lot of research and I came across a guy called Mark Allen who's won the World Championship Ironman event 6 times in a row. This guy knows what he's doing. And he actually says any endurance event is any exercise over 4 minutes. So anything that you're going to do over 4 minutes, you have to radically change the way you exercise. And that was the first key point in this quest for knowledge about how I do an Ironman triathlon. And the first thing to do was to rewind exercise completely. Now I'm talking about completing it here and not competing. There's a big difference. And in order to complete, I had to rewind my exercise to the point where it was barely exercise. So I worked on a basis of measuring my heart, the thing that drives my whole body. And the way that I did that was to find your maximum heart rate, the kind of cross-trainer thing that you might do, and rewind it right back to 60 or 70% of that capacity. There's a simple formula you can use to calculate that. But then you get out on your bike when you first start doing this and you start riding at 60, 70% capacity, and you get overtaken by, first of all the cyclists, but then also all the old people out for a jolly jaunt on the bike, and then sometimes kids on BMXs. But ultimately you get fitter and fitter and fitter the more you do it. And the exercise is all about being long and low. And the reason we do that is during such an endurance event, you're not going to be reliant on using those fast carbohydrate energy stores that you use when you typically go out for a quick jog or a run. You're going to be using the biggest fuel source in your body, which is stored here and here and here and all over. It's stored as fat, and we have to tap into those reserves to be able to exercise for long distances. And the way we do that is to rewind completely and allow our body to make sure it can use those energy sources to drive us forward when we go forward. The second big factor is accountability. And I made myself be accountable to different sources to make sure that when that alarm went off in the morning at 5 a.m. in the depths of winter, because I had a 50-mile bike ride to do, I knew that the only reason that I was going to do that was if I was accountable to somebody else. So my training partner and cousin James became my accountable partner. He lives in Leamington Spa, I live in Norwich, so we can't train together. So the way we did that is we used a social media platform called Strava, which is Strava for athletes and the like. And so at the start of entering, we shared each other's training plan. We were aiming for different things. I was aiming for completion. James is a lot younger than I and was aiming for a time. But we shared our plans and goals with each other so that we both knew if we skipped one of those exercises or we didn't fancy getting out of bed in the morning, then actually we'd be accountable to the other person. And the other big factor is that once you'd done the exercise, you then got congratulated on it, or you had a little, oh, how did that go? Or you had some shared knowledge. That was massive all across the piece, was being able to share and account to each other. And the second one is you make yourself accountable to other sources as well, so the businesses that I worked with. So I was in a really fortunate position in 4 Networking, where businesses were thoroughly encouraging throughout the whole process of training for this, to the point where they sponsored me. So as soon as they start to put money on the line, in terms of it going to the charities, a scope, then you're accountable to those businesses as well. There's no way that I can't fail. There's no way that I can't do this. And another big factor was making myself accountable to a club. And the big thing about the club, it's Trianglia in Norwich, the big thing about the club is that I was actually making a commitment to them. I was entering under their brand, so I had to make sure that I performed under their brand. And also in return, they provided me with fantastic coaching when it came to the swimming. So they changed and radicalised my stroke so that I could get out of the water at 2.4 mile and actually be ready to jump on my bike and do a 112-mile bike ride. Slightly, yeah. And then the third big factor before we get on to the fourth secret one, the third big factor is control. You have to bring massive elements of control into your life. One of the big factors is diet. You totally change the way that you eat and the way that you live. And actually, when you're training 15 hours a week, in most cases, you can actually eat whatever it is that you want. You know, you're using up so much fuel that you actually can't even empty the cupboards enough. But what you do become conscious of is you want to fill that with quality stuff, because that then turns into good fuel and you can eat even more of it. So really, you just go to Aldi, you go to the chickpeas and red kidney bean section and you empty the shelves of 35p chickpeas and basically put it on every meal. And it's a really good cheap source of protein. You know, you can't have steak and fish all the time, but it is a heavy protein-based diet. And that's where you change your mentality. And that's continued onwards, and it is a highly recommended way of going forward. Other elements of control, really simple changes that I had to make in life. I was working on a contract 7 miles away. A really simple thing to do is to ditch the car and just go on the bike. It's commuting on the bike. It's very, very simple. You measure it and it's there and it's all the time. And for those of us who work at home, you can still commute. You just do a loop. It's really easy. You get up early, you do a loop, you're commuted to work. And other elements of control are to ditch the crap in your life. You know, the things like watching constant soap operas. You know, if you're watching soap operas, you know, get rid of them or just watch one rather than 3. You know, if you're on social media, it's important for our businesses. but section it out into your working day. So have half an hour in the morning and half an hour in the evening. If you can grab just half an hour or an hour each day to actually retract and say, in this half an hour now, I'm going to go and take some exercise rather than watch the TV, then that control element will fit in. Okay, so on the day, 15th of July 2015, we've entered the water at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we've done a beautiful swim because of our stroke, highly efficient. I honestly, that swim, the 2.5 mile, I didn't feel like I'd exercised when I exited that water. It was quite incredible. And then you get on the bike in horrendous conditions, and in my beautiful home county of Lancashire, it's hilly, but you're guided up those hills by the most fantastic Tour de France style crowds. It's an amazing event on the day, and very well supported. And we got through that quite nicely, and then you get off your bike and you start the marathon. And a marathon is 42 kilometres, a working kilometres, and at 25 kilometres I absolutely crashed and burned. I hadn't, you get to that point where there's something going to happen and you know it's coming. And the legs were basically saying, this is it, Craig, this is kind of up, and this is 14 hours in, this is kind of the end point, but you know it's coming, you've prepared for it. And this is when you need that fourth factor. And I'm not sure it can be taught, but I call it edge. That fourth factor is an edge that I believe I have. And you kind of have that edge from all the things that you've done up until that point. And that may be from sporting achievements. It may come from, in my case, it came from my parents. They always drove me to do the best that I could. I always put 100% into everything that I do, and that included this mission to try and achieve that goal. So at 14 hours, I needed edge to try and get me through that. And then, just take a minute actually, because people ask me, why would you do such a crazy thing? And I always thought that I knew the answer up until recently, so 6 months on. And it really had a lot of time to try and sit and think about why I actually did this. And originally you think, yeah, it's health and fitness, it's midlife crisis, whatever it is. But actually I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'd had 5 jobs in my time before I set up my own business. And in 3 of those I'd left on good terms and enjoyed them and left on my terms. And in 2 of them, I've been called into darkened rooms and been told I wasn't good enough. When actually, I thought I was, but I've been called into darkened rooms and told I wasn't good enough. And I think part of that was telling me, actually, I'm setting up my own business. This was at the same time as Ironman. I need to have a quick win that's going to tell me, you know what, Craig, you are good enough and you can achieve something absolutely crazy or stupid and get that message across to yourself before you take the next step into your business. And then one of the other key questions I get asked is, what's the biggest learning thing from this? And for me, a big learning factor is never take the relationships around you for granted. And I'll take that away from me from doing the Ironman. So back to the 14 hours. You're 14 hours in, your legs are telling you this is it, Craig, you've got the edge. You start to then think about, right, I've got to do calculations here. I've got 18 kilometres left to go before I get to that finish line, the red carpet, the crowds, the words and everything else. I've got 18 kilometres to go. And I look at the clock, so 3 hours, 18 kilometres, that's pretty easy, isn't it? Can we all work that out? You have to go, 6 kilometres every hour. It took me 20 minutes to work that out in my head. The brain was gone, the legs were gone, and everything else. But the edge took me through, and it takes me through to that red carpet section in Bolton. We got hundreds of people on the sides in the chairs there cheering you over to the end. And then the winner, the ladies' winner of Ironman, who'd finished 8 hours before me, ready to present a medal to me. And at 10:17 p.m. on the 15th of July 2015, I heard those immortal words, Craig Davies, you are an Ironman.
Smile, be chat, join for networking.